So I'm doing this video today more on the cryptid subject and spiritual warfare in general. Because I started this channel about 3 or 4 years ago. It's pretty much based on spiritual warfare altogether because that's what we're living nowadays. About, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago when I started realizing that people walking around in the flesh and blood have this demonic spirit about them and actually are out to harm people and get great pleasure from it, and they walk around this earth as human beings, but their spirit is from darkness, and that's just the way it is. We have to live amongst these people, and then we also have the spirit of darkness in the forest that we have to live amongst. Whether we see it with our naked eye or not, I know it's there. I know what I've experienced, and I'm going to go into more of what I've experienced and show some pictures that I've captured, what I believe are cryptid paranormal things that I didn't see with the naked eye, but I did catch some few things on film. And all of this is taking place in Kentucky, Tennessee area, eastern Kentucky, and the land between the lakes is where I've gotten all my photos. But first, I just wanted to touch on the subject of spiritual warfare because that's what we're all living today. And our battle is not with flesh and blood necessarily, it's with the spirits and the principalities of darkness. That's what our battle is, whether we can see it or whether it be flesh and blood people that we have to deal with. So I just wanted to touch base on this, and it's not just about Bigfoot and Dogman. It's about the whole spiritual warfare battle that we have to go out in the world and fight every day. That's becoming prevalent, and with CERN and everything, and all these elites conjuring up, these portals, and demonic spirits are roaming the earth now more than ever. And our government is involved in a lot of this stuff with CERN, and they know about these creatures in the forest, and they're not ever going to let that out into the public. They've known about this as long as man has been around. They've known about it. As a matter of fact, the Dogman, down in the land between the lakes, I'm just going to touch on this subject for a minute. A friend of mine that I went camping with down there, and we went to the Dogman conference. We're going to get together and we're going to do a video and tell our story about our adventure at Land Between the Lakes, because we did have a lot of activity going on. We both had a couple of experiences, and I captured some photos, and it was just really interesting all around. So we're going to do a video together on that subject coming up here real soon, so that'll be interesting. But I just want to say one thing about Land Between the Lakes. Back in the 1980s, well, let's just start at the beginning. Back in the 50s, early 60s, late 50s, early 60s, the government, by eminent domain, took over this area at Land Between the Lakes, southwestern Kentucky and northwestern Tennessee. And they took this land and they flooded this area out to create this peninsula that is surrounded by water, and there's like one way in, one way out. You got to go across bridges and stuff. But they did this, I don't know why they kicked everybody out. Eminent domain. They took over this area and they created this recreational area. But when they first took over the area and was doing all the work and everything, the military was in there. They created these bunkers and things, and there was a lot of military activity going on in this area at that time. And when they were finished with their work, and they created this recreational area for people to camp and hunt and just enjoy, they started having all these dogman sightings all of a sudden. So, I mean, there wasn't dogman sightings before this. After our government took over this land and sort of, reconstructed it and ran everybody out. So I just found that to be very interesting. There was a massacre back in the 80s. I'm going to let my friend tell you that story when we do the video. She's very good. She's an author as well, and she's very good with words. I'm going to let her tell that story about the massacre and the Beast of LBL. But anyway, I just wanted to give you that little preview of what the LBL is all about and the dogman sightings down there. And there's also a lot of paranormal activity there. There's a lot of cemeteries that date back to the 1800s. We actually camped right by one. So that just gives you a little general idea of what the LBL is all about. So, back to the spiritual warfare subject. I have, since I started camping and hiking about 2.5 years ago, around 2020, when everything went crazy and, well, we all know what happened, I started going out in the woods just to get away from clown world, basically, and away from everybody and their mask and their rules and everything that was going on. And at the same time, I wanted to prepare myself for what's coming. Obviously, the Great Reset's coming, the beast system is coming. I'm not going to be a part of that system, so I wanted to prepare myself mentally, physically, and spiritually. And physically, I needed to get out in the woods, and I needed to learn how to do some survival skills, and be able to, spend the night out in the woods by myself and not be afraid. And honestly, to this day, I still can't really do that. And it's only because of the things that I've heard and experienced. I haven't ever seen anything with my own two eyes, but I've experienced a lot as far as audio, as far as hearing things. I think my first experience was the owl mimics and the tree knocks. And let me just say, I've heard tree knocks as long as I've been hiking in the woods, and just never really thought of it as being anything other than a natural sound in the woods, maybe woodpecker or something. But some of these tree knocks, you'll ask yourself, I mean, what is that? It's a little weird, and you just shrug it off, and you just, as a noise out of the woods. But I have heard tree knocks, I've heard whoops. Whoop, whoop, whoop. I've heard that, and I've just thought, well, am I in the jungle? And just shrug it off. It's like, wow, I wonder what that was. So yeah, I've heard that, and I've heard things like tree falls, like during the day, like a calm, beautiful day. One day I was setting up my camp, just got there, it was around 11 a.m., and, just putting my tent up, hadn't been there 5 minutes, and all of a sudden I hear right across the road, not far, across the gravel road, on the ridge, a tree being uprooted and falling. And if you've never heard a tree fall in the woods, it is disturbing, because it's very loud when you hear roots popping and you hear this humongous tree falling, and it's hitting everything on the way down, and you can almost feel the ground shake when it hits the ground. But that shouldn't be happening when it's calm on a sunny day with no wind. I've heard this. It's common for me to go out in the woods now, and when I first started hiking, I thought, well, I wonder what it sounds like when a tree falls, because, you see dead trees falling all over the place. And I never really heard anything for a long time. I never heard a tree fall until I got involved with searching out Bigfoot and interested in cryptids and things. I think it's their way of letting you know that they're there, because if you know about them, they know about you. The tree knocks are a certain way of communicating. They communicate with each other as well to let other cryptids know how many of how many of you are in your party. If you hear one knock, it's just one. If you hear two knocks, it's two people. If you hear three knocks, it's usually three people. But I have yet to hear anything when I'm with somebody else. It's always when I'm by myself that I hear anything at all. I've actually gotten on the trail before by myself, past some campers, and as soon as I get out of hearing range of the campers, I start hearing all this whooping and hollering and tree knocks, and just like almost like a huge crowd of people were just making a lot of noise. But it wasn't people, it wasn't close. I knew personally what it was. I've also been camping by myself. Around 10 p.m. start a fire. I usually always camp around a creek, Indian Creek to be specific, in the Red River Gorge. And I was sitting around the campfire one night by myself, about ready to go to my tent, just watching the fire there. And I hear, out of a clear night, calm, nothing going on, not even any wind, this huge splash right behind me in the creek. Like it had to be a huge rock was thrown, a huge limb, or something. But I never saw anything obvious to make that noise. I've had smells, the skunk smell around my house, and of course you all know about the whistle. And I think that's the most amazing experience I've ever had in my entire life of anything paranormal, because this whistle was almost amped with an amplifier. That's how loud this whistle was. It was a human whistle, but it did not come from a human. So these are just some of the things that I've experienced when I go out, experienced at my home. And by the way, I don't go outside at my house now. I sort of have, after dark, it's sort of hard for me to go outside, I'm not going to lie, because I'm afraid I'm going to hear it again. And like I said, I don't know how to take that whistle, whether it was nefarious, just communication, just messing with me. I don't know. Nothing bad has happened to me or my pets. But all I know is what I heard. So let me get on now and quit rattling my trap and show you all some actual photos that I have. And I made a video about this particular structure. This is the TP structure that I found in eastern Kentucky, in Menifee County. In this particular hike, I had parked at a cemetery. Well, first I had to go about 2.5 miles in on an ATV trail in my Jeep. I didn't even realize I had to go in that way, but that's the way to the trailhead, and the trailhead is an actual cemetery. And a lot of, some of those graves had dated back to the 1800s as well. And from the cemetery, you get on an old logging road that had been gated off, and you hike about 1.5 miles down this old logging road. So about halfway, I want to say about 3/4 of a mile in, I find this. And it stood out big time. Just going to find the top of it. This is the top of the TP. And you can just kind of see how, I mean, people want to argue that that's natural. But to me, that is not natural. They weave things. I actually had this on Facebook, this photo of the TP in a group that I belong to, Eastern Kentucky Bigfoot Organization. I'm also a member of the BFRO, Bigfoot Research Organization in general. And I had somebody comment that's a researcher that told me that this here is called a 5-star portal. It's not really a TP. So I just found that to be interesting. So on down the road, when you get to the Vista I was going to. This is past the TP. As soon as I entered this area here, you can see this huge 100-foot tree was bent. And they pin them down. Let's see if I have the, I don't have the picture of it actually being pinned down. But, I mean, when you see a 100-foot tree bent over like that, it's still alive, and it's pinned, oh yeah, there it is. If you can see that, right there. They interlock things. All their structures are locked. So it's not like a storm is going to come by and interlock this 100-foot sapling and bend it over like that. And when I went back to this area about a month later, this particular structure was pulled down to my level, like you had to duck to go under this arch. And here, when I first walked into that area, is this. It's a huge tree break. They're notorious for X's, these X formations. They're not trees in the ground. They're actual, well, the one that's broken is in the ground, but the X has been put there. And the break goes right through that X. If you see what I mean right here. I mean, this was the first thing that I noticed as soon as I walked into the wooded area to go to that vista. And I mean, this wooded area right here was just, it had structures everywhere. Let's see, there's another one here. An asterisk. They love to make asterisks as well. I mean, can you see this? I mean, this is not a natural, it's not natural tree fall. And there's a big X in the back there. I mean, there's just all kinds of squatchy stuff going on right here. And I walked through this area alone. This was the eeriest hike I've been on, because the whole entire time I was on this hike to go to this vista, the vista part was beautiful. The wind was blowing. You could hear the birds when I got there. But the whole entire 2.5 miles in was quiet. There was no noise. You could hear no birds. I mean, just very, very eerie, especially on that road that I walked 1.5 miles on to get to this part. Yeah, I was just really on my toes on this hike, because I actually heard some stick breaks and a couple of things. You know, I didn't see a solitary soul either on the entire hike. I'm trying to show you all the ones I've gotten here first in Kentucky. Oh yeah, at the Red River Gorge. And this, I don't know if y'all can see it or not. Yeah, you can see it. And people will say, that's just shadow, that's just, you know. But look at the shadows beside it. This particular shadow has shoulders, it has a head, and it's way darker than the other shadows. It almost even looks like you can